Malo and greetings from Tonga. Nah, jokes guys. It's just me, Shelley, talking to you from the past to you now in the future. This summer, I realised that you all want to go to the beach. You'll be disappearing off to other people's friends and families. So having a series that builds on each other, this to this, that joke to that joke, is not going to work. But we still need to do the Jesus thing, the church thing, and we still need to do the Bible thing. So we're doing a series called My Favourite Verse and Why. It's very simple. Someone will tell you their name. Hello, my name is Shelley. Their favourite verse, we're going to get to that, and why, I'm going to get to that. In November, I sent an email saying, let's hear from you. Some people went straight, nah, I don't want to do that. Others said, maybe 2. Some said, maybe 5. And no one took me up on doing a sermon apart from Sione. And we know you're going to like that. We'll do one later in summer. But what I want for us to do is to create a book of Whangarei Central Baptist with my favourite verse and why written down. It's a book, right? And for the kids, the little ones, who might not have a favourite verse and why, I want you to draw a picture of your favourite story, David and Goliath, something with swords that's savvy, maybe something about Jesus, and get your family or friends to help you write in the bit, like why. You draw the picture, they do the writing, we make 2 books, and we learn about God, we learn about each other, and we learn about our family who loves God together. And on your pieces of paper you'll see that this is a draft. This is a draft, which means don't spend heaps of time doing it now. I want you to think about it, take it home, think about it some more, and then we'll sort out a good copy when I get home. And I realise you are asking a pastor to tell you their favourite verse. It's like asking a child to give you their favourite ice cream. There are many. There is really good vanilla. Then there's Duck Island Fairy Bread, which is amazing. It comes in a biscuit with shortbread. And then there's Deep South Licorice, which is amazing. So to tell you my favourite verses, I have to tell you some of the ones that are good but not amazing. They are French vanilla, not vanilla, if you get my drift. Micah 6:8 of course is up there. He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and walk humbly with your God? Or, for all of you out there, Numbers 12:3. Now Moses was a very humble man, more so than any man on the face of the earth. Which is funny, right? You know why it's funny. You know why it's funny. Oh, it's funny because Moses is known to be the author of Numbers. What a humble guy. The most humble man on earth. But if I had to absolutely, unequivocally list my favourite verse, my absolute favourite is called from the Gospel of John. John chapter 8 verse 6. But first I have to tell you a little story about what's going on around it. 5 chapters before, in John 13, John starts telling the story of Jesus turning his face towards Jerusalem. Everything that happens now is about Jesus and what's going to happen in Jerusalem. This is all. Jesus starts washing his disciples' feet, and it's 5 chapters of Jesus trying to drum in the last bits of information he possibly can to clue into these 12 guys everything that they need to remember for what's going to happen. In chapter 17 he prays this massive prayer for them. He prays that his disciples and those who will come in after them will know the Father in the same way that he has, and have the same access to God as he has, which is amazing. The triune God has this perfect harmony of relationship, and so Jesus is praying for his disciples, then and now, that we will know God in the same way, that we will have the same relationship that God had with himself. And so chapter 18 starts with this trip up the Mount of Olives. We don't get the disciples going to sleep or Jesus sweating blood in this gospel. So beginning John 18. When he'd finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. And on the other side there was a garden where he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew this place because Jesus had met there often with the disciples. So Judas came to the garden guarded with a guiding detachment of soldiers and some officials and the chief of priests and the Pharisees. And they were carrying torches and lanterns and weapons. And Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen, went out and said, "Who is it that you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there. And when Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. And again he asked them, "Who is it that you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I tell you that I am he. If you're looking for me, then let these men go." So I'm being a little bit of a cheat. My favourite verse is more than one verse. It's 5 and a bit of 6. "I am he." And then they fell to the ground. And all the way through the book of John, Jesus had been calling him all these very specific understandings of who he is as God. Understandings that the people of Israel knew. These are the I am statements. I am who I say I am, it says in the Old Testament of Deuteronomy. I am was the sign of protection and presence and God being with his people. And now Jesus turns up in human flesh and says, "I am." And there's 7 of them that people note. John 6, "I am the bread of life." John 10, "I am the light of the world." John 10, "I am the gate." John 10 again, "I am the good shepherd." "I am the resurrection and the life." John 11, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." John 14, "I am the true vine." John 15. And each time Jesus says one of these bold statements saying, "I am God. Here is how I am providing for you in life and sufficiency and wisdom and life and death and resurrection," the people don't get it. In John 8, Jesus says, "I am the bread of life," and there's 20 or so verses about how the people go on about like, how can this dude be bread? Like, isn't he Joseph's son? And there are more than 60 verses in that chapter. And then towards the end, the disciples, verse 66, the disciples don't get it and they leave. And he's just left with this 12. And even this 12 are kind of confused about what's going on. Isn't he a human? How can he be bread? And most people stop at 7, but the 8 is my absolute favourite. Who are you looking for? We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And he just says, "I am he." And at this time of the night, he is surrounded by Roman soldiers and is betrayed by the 12, one of his own. This time, there is no Jesus making metaphorical statements. He's not explaining the wisdom or the history of who God has been for the nation and the people of Israel. Here now, his power is at work. "I am he says. And they drew back and fell to the ground. And the words went backwards to depict the soldiers and the temple police staggering back and stumbling backwards, like some massive force had pushed them back. And the word fall in Greek means to fall, which like no da Shelley, but more so. To fall, it means falling like a dead person. It appeared that they had fallen like they were dead. And these were not just any soldiers. Like, they weren't your brother and his mate and the next door neighbour with like a bit of wood. These were Roman soldiers and temple trained guards. And they come with spears and clubs to help capture Jesus. And they fall like dead at his word. At his word. And this becomes important later on for why I like this verse. And as they announce that they are searching for Jesus of Nazareth, he just says, "I am he. I am." And he announces himself to be the same God as what was in the Old Testament. And as Jesus spoke this word, it's like this great blast of power was unleashed from him. So strong that it literally threw these dudes to the ground. And could you imagine trained soldiers being like, "What the heck just happened like that?" Like, shame. Like, they haven't even got time to get out their swords or like figure out what's going on. They are now on the ground. What is happening? They had discovered that Jesus, with his words, had power over men, Romans. The tales that they had heard about Jesus' power must have been true. This is the guy who had raised people from the dead, who had made bread appear from nowhere. He must have been pretty good if he was calling himself the I Am. So we've had Jesus showing his miraculous power. And he did all these healings, but now it his power. In his power he proved that he could not be taken by force. And I imagine Simon the Zealot being like super excited, like, yes, here we go, Jesus, I've been waiting, let's go. And we all know that Peter got a bit worked up, right? Because he's about to pull out his sword and be like, I'll save you, Jesus! Ah, Peter. But he didn't, right? He didn't, because Jesus woefully surrendered to these men, knowing that this was the plan all along. His plan to redeem mankind didn't come from proving himself to be the biggest and most powerful and most forceful. No one took Jesus away. He went willingly. Jesus always went willingly. From heaven to earth, from the valley here to the court, from the court to the cross. Jesus went willingly every time. And it makes me think of all the times that Jesus reimagined what we think power and authority and kingship looks like. Before all the talk of David, amongst the law in Deuteronomy 17, there is this job description of what it meant to be the king of the nation of Israel. It talks about a king not having wealth or power, not owning horses, not returning to Egypt and not having many, many, many wives, but to be that nation's priest, the one who would mediate between God and all the people, the one who would know and love and work to fulfill the law of God. So we can tick that off on our box of who Jesus is, the good and appropriate king laid out for the people in the book of Deuteronomy. But even more so, Jesus continues to reset what we think of winning looks like, even till the very end. Born in a manger, lived an ordinary life, rode a donkey. And the only time we ever see a picture of Jesus riding a horse is in the book of Revelation. But we miss a detail. Jesus, the one riding a horse, is called the Word of God. And he's not riding a red horse of war, but a white horse of triumph. And he rides it with the sword protruding from his mouth. Jesus, who John calls the Word. Jesus doesn't overcome the evil by war, but by his word. What we see in John 18:6 is a little taste of what God, through Christ, is continually doing. Jesus doesn't wage war. He is not a murderer. He is not a beast like the Roman armies. Jesus wages war as the slaughtered Lamb of God. In Revelation 19:13 it says that he wears this robe dipped in blood. And this is not the blood of his enemies, but the blood of his own self. That is through his sacrifice that he has won triumph. And after riding the donkey of peace on Palm Sunday, he has this peaceable kingdom, not a violent kingdom. There is this ruse that we come to justice and eventual peace through war, but Jesus says, no, this is not my way. Christ never rides out to war. He's already won the victory, so he rides out in triumph. But getting back to John 18:6, not John from Revelation. Even in the crunch, this is what I like this verse. There was nothing panic about God. Nothing of Jesus's brain was like, oh. Nothing of his plan of redemption was being derailed here. And in this moment where everybody else was like, what the crazy heck? He was reminding his people of who he was. I am, he said. And I will do what I need to do. And what he did was always consistent to who he was and who he will be in Revelation. His power was revealed, but not in might or not in desperation. He showed himself as powerful, but hurt no one. And in the end, he went willingly so he could be the sacrifice, the redeeming one. He himself made himself a sacrifice so this Shelley could be revealed and redeemed and made new. The best Shelley that I could ever be is only because of Christ. So my name is Shelley, and John 18:6 and a bit of 5 is my favourite verse. Because it reminds me that all the way through, that Jesus is always at work for the good of his creation, even at the cost to himself. That he is the great I am, always consistent, always in triumph, and the only provider that we ever need. So get to work on your draft, guys. I want to make that book.